Welcome to the Forge Over 40 podcast. My name is Steve Didier, and this show is for high performers who refuse to let their edge quietly erode. If you've built companies, led teams, carried responsibility for decades, but lately your focus feels duller, decisions feel heavier, and your mental stamina isn't quite what it used to be, this is where we rebuild the biological systems that your leadership depends on. And we do it on a physiological level. So, let's start today with a situation that a lot of high performers over 40 find incredibly frustrating. You are doing the things that are supposed to give you energy. You train, you go to the gym, you try and sleep, you make reasonably good food choices, you stay productive, you're disciplined, and yet you still feel tired most of the day. Not falling asleep at your desk sort of tired, but that low-grade, persistent fatigue where your energy just never really feels strong. Your brain works, but it feels like it's operating at 70%. You get through the day, but everything takes so much effort than it used to. The confusing part is this. From the outside, it looks like you're doing everything right. You're working out, you're staying active, you're trying to take care of yourself. So the question then is, why does your system still feel drained? For a lot of high performers, this is where the frustration begins, because when effort doesn't produce the expected result, the default response is to assume you just need to apply more discipline, train harder, push harder, be more consistent. But the real issue is usually not discipline. It's physiology. And there's one metabolic mistake that I see consistently in high performers that creates this exact pattern. Underfueling the system while demanding a high output. So let's walk through what that actually looks like. You wake up early. You move straight into work mode. A couple cups of coffee go in first. Breakfast, a little more gets skipped more often than not because the morning's busy. Meetings start stacking, emails begin flowing. Your brain immediately starts solving problems. Hours pass, you're operating on caffeine and stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. Lunch either happens late or in some cases gets skipped entirely. Then somewhere in the afternoon, that energy drop shows up. Focus softens, motivation dips, your brain feels slightly foggy, and the solution becomes another coffee or maybe a quick snack. What's happening in that situation is not mysterious. It's metabolic. Your brain is one of the most energy-demanding organs in the entire body. Strategic thinking, problem solving, decision making, all of those things require fuel, and a lot of fuel. If you don't provide that fuel through stable metabolic input, the body only has one option. It compensates. Your stress hormones start to rise. Cortisol mobilizes stored glucose that's stored in the liver. Adrenaline keeps your nervous system alert. And for a while, that system works. You feel sharp, you feel engaged, you feel focused. But that energy is coming from stress chemistry, not a stable metabolism. Eventually, the system runs out of easy resources. Blood sugar drops, the brain feels it immediately. And that is when the fatigue starts creeping in. Now here's the twist that's going to get you. The more disciplined someone is, the more likely they are to fall into this pattern. Because discipline often shows up as pushing through fatigue instead of listening to your physiology. You skip meals, you work longer hours, you slam more caffeine, you ignore the signals. And if you add intense gym time into that environment, the metabolic stress compounds. I experienced this firsthand during the years when I was balancing a demanding real estate business with training for Muay Thai fights. The training sessions were brutal. The conditioning work was constant. And at the same time, I was running a business that required focus, negotiation, and decision-making every single day. Looking back now, this mistake was obvious. I was placing an enormous amount of demand on the system while often underfueling it. Training stress, business stress, sleep disruption, loads and loads of caffeine, coffee all day long, pre-workout before training, anything to keep myself running at full speed. The nervous system stayed activated. Energy became inconsistent, and my ability to maintain sharp focus throughout the day started slipping. And like many of you, I thought the solution was just to push harder, more discipline, more effort. But the fact is, physiology doesn't respond to willpower. The body needs energy input to produce energy output. If that input becomes inconsistent, the entire system starts running on stress signals instead. Now, if you layer on top of all that the trendy modern health advice, intermittent fasting, aggressive calorie restriction, biohacking trends that treat hunger like weakness, under the right circumstances, fasting can be useful, but context absolutely matters. If you're carrying high cognitive load, high training load, high stress, and you have prolonged underfueling, that often pushes the metabolism deeper into survival mode. Cortisol rises, adrenaline keeps energy moving. But the system is slowly becoming unstable, and the person experiencing it starts to feel tired all day, even though they believe they're doing everything right. In the next little bit, we're going to dig deeper into what actually happens inside the body when metabolism shifts into this stress-driven energy pattern. Because once you understand how blood sugar stability, mitochondrial energy production, and the nervous system signaling all interact with each other, the mystery of feeling tired all day starts to make a lot more sense. So let's dig a little deeper into what's actually happening inside the body when you're underfueling your metabolism while at the same time demanding high performance. Once this pattern starts, the body doesn't simply just run out of energy. It completely changes the way that it produces energy. And that is where the fatigue pattern starts creeping in. When you wake up and you skip food, your brain still needs to function. Things like decision-making, problem-solving, strategic thinking, all of those processes require glucose and ATP inside the brain. If you don't provide fuel through nutrition, the body compensates by mobilizing stored energy. And the hormones responsible for that are cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol releases stored glucose from the liver. Adrenaline increases alertness and nervous system activation. Together, those hormones create the feeling that many high performers recognize in the morning. You feel sharp, you feel focused, you feel productive. But that energy is not coming from stable metabolic support. It's coming from a stress response. Now, you have to understand that stress chemistry is incredibly effective in short bursts. That's how the body evolved. If you're being chased by something dangerous, stress hormones mobilize energy quickly so that you can respond to that danger. But when stress chemistry becomes the primary way that your metabolism generates energy, your systems are going to start drifting. Here's what that pattern looks like. Morning begins with caffeine. Caffeine stimulates the nervous system and blocks fatigue signals going to the brain. Cortisol is already naturally rising in the morning, so caffeine stacks on top of that signal. You feel alert, you feel engaged, you're ready to rock and roll. Your brain begins burning energy very quickly as meetings, decisions, and other responsibilities stack up. But there's a problem here. The brain is consuming fuel at an astonishing rate, while at the same time, there's no fuel coming in. So the body keeps relying on stress hormones to maintain energy. Cortisol releases more glucose. Adrenaline keeps the nervous system activated. The system is being held together by a thread, and at some point, something's got to give. Eventually, the available energy supply will start to drop. The liver can only release so much stored glucose. When those stores start running low, the brain feels it immediately. Focus softens, energy dips, and your motivation drops. That's the afternoon crash that many high performers experience. Now, the instinctive response is usually another stimulant, another coffee, another quick snack, something quick to just bring the system back online. Those types of things create a temporary spike in blood sugar. Your energy improves briefly, but the spike triggers an insulin response. Insulin moves glucose out of the bloodstream and into the cells. And when that response is aggressive, blood sugar often drops again hard shortly thereafter. So now you've created a metabolic roller coaster. Your energy is up and down all day long, each time that cycle happens, the nervous system will step in to stabilize it. Stress hormones fire again, cortisol rises, adrenaline keeps your brain alert. By the end of the day, your nervous system has been activated repeatedly just to maintain energy. And this is probably obviously where things get problematic, because when this pattern continues for long enough, it begins affecting mitochondrial efficiency. Mitochondria are the structures inside your cells responsible for producing ATP. ATP is the energy currency that your body uses to do work. When blood sugar becomes unstable and stress hormones remain elevated, the cellular environment becomes less efficient for energy production. Inflammation slowly creeps upward, insulin signaling becomes less predictable, and the mitochondria themselves begin operating under more stress. The result was pretty subtle. At first, energy production becomes slightly less efficient. Recovery becomes a little bit slower. Cognitive endurance begins declining just a little bit. Most people don't notice the shift immediately. They simply, compensate. More caffeine, harder workouts, more effort. But eventually, the pattern becomes much harder to ignore. You start waking up really tired. Energy fluctuates throughout the day. Focus becomes very difficult to maintain. And despite doing all the things that are supposed to produce energy, the system still feels drained. Now, here's another factor that makes it worse for many high performers. Overtraining layered on top of underfueling. Training, your gym time, that's a stress signal. It's a very productive one. Resistance training improves muscle mass, which provides a huge array of benefits. Aerobic work improves mitochondrial density. Those adaptations are incredibly beneficial, but training requires fuel to support recovery. If someone is training hard while consistently undereating, the body is receiving mixed signals. Your training says adapt, grow stronger, increase capacity. But the metabolic environment says we need to conserve energy and reduce output a little bit. Eventually, the body always leans toward conservation. Energy production slows, recovery becomes inconsistent, and fatigue starts to accumulate. Now, the person experiencing it often believes they simply need more discipline. But the system isn't lacking in discipline, it's lacking in metabolic stability. Once metabolism starts stabilizing again, things like consistent fuel, stable blood sugar, a nervous system that doesn't rely on stress hormones to produce energy, the entire system begins functioning differently. Energy becomes predictable, focus stabilizes, and recovery improves. In the final bit here, we're going to talk about exactly how high performers rebuild that metabolic stability so energy stops feeling like something they can have to fight for. Because the biological hierarchy, if that's restored properly, fatigue stops dominating the day and the system starts producing energy the way that it was designed to. So now we get to a very practical question. If you're doing all the things that are supposed to give you energy, training hard, working hard, trying to sleep, and eating reasonably well, but you still feel tired most of the day, how do you actually fix it? The solution is not pushing harder. It's not another supplement stack. The real solution is rebuilding the biological hierarchy that produces stable energy in the first place. Once that hierarchy is restored, fatigue is going to go away. Energy is going to be something the body just produces reliably again. And the first place that starts is metabolic rhythm. Your metabolism is heavily influenced by timing. When you eat, when you move, when you expose your body to light, and when you sleep. All of those signals tell your physiology to organize energy production across the entire day. When those signals are chaotic, however, energy becomes chaotic as well. One of the most powerful changes high performers can make is simply providing the body with consistent fuel earlier in the day. Not massive meals, not force-feeding yourself calories, but breaking the pattern where your brain is expected to operate at full capacity for half the day on caffeine alone. When protein and other nutrients enter the system early in the day, several things begin improving almost immediately. Blood sugar stabilizes. Cortisol doesn't need to spike repeatedly to mobilize stored glucose. The nervous system becomes calmer, and cognitive endurance improves, and it improves quite a bit. This is one of the biggest surprises for people who have been running on caffeine and stress hormones for years. When the brain receives stable fuel, focus becomes easy to sustain. You don't need to constantly stimulate the system just to maintain output. Now, the second piece of rebuilding energy is protecting muscle mass. Muscle tissue plays a much bigger role in metabolic health than most people realize. Muscle helps regulate blood sugar. It improves insulin sensitivity. It increases mitochondrial density, and it acts as a metabolic buffer when the body is experiencing stress. As we move past 40, maintaining muscle becomes one of the most powerful ways to stabilize metabolism. Resistance training signals the body to keep that muscle, but the signal only works if the body receives the nutrients required to support it. Training hard while consistently underfueling the system sends mixed messages to the body. The training says, adapt, grow stronger, increase capacity. But the metabolic environment says, conserve energy. And the body will always lean toward conservation. This means your energy production is going to slow, your recovery is going to weaken. And this is why fueling the system properly becomes essential for high performers who train regularly. Now, let's talk about stress dosing, because this is another place where discipline can actually work against your physiology. Stress is not the enemy. Driven people thrive on stress. Stress triggers adaptation and it makes you stronger. But stress must alternate with recovery. Adaptation happens during recovery, not during the stress itself. This is where a lot of modern biohacking culture has created confusion. People stack stress signals endlessly. Hard training, cold plunges, aggressive fasting, high caffeine intake, and sleep restriction. All of that gets framed as toughness, grit. But physiologically, those inputs all activate the same system. That's the sympathetic nervous system. If that system never gets a break from activation, adaptation slows down, energy production declines, fatigue accumulates, and resilience decreases. The person experiencing it, again, they usually believe they just need to push harder. The reality is the system needs clear recovery signals. So this brings us something that sits very high in the biological hierarchy, sleep quality. Sleep is where the system does most of its repair work. During deep sleep, several important processes occur. Hormone rhythms reset, growth hormone pulses, the brain clears metabolic waste, and inflammation decreases. If sleep becomes shallow or fragmented, the system never fully completes those processes, which means the next day begins with less recovery than the day before. Over time, that deficit is going to accumulate. Energy is going to decline, focus becomes harder, and recovery slows down. This is one of the reasons we need to at least just touch on the subject of alcohol. In many professional environments, alcohol becomes the default decompression tool. Client dinners, networking events, celebrations, etc. A drink or two at night feels normal. It's very common. But physiologically, alcohol interferes with the exact sleep cycles the body needs for restoration. It fragments REM sleep. It reduces deep sleep. And it also increases nighttime awakenings, even if you don't remember them. The result of all that is sleep that looks long enough on paper, but never fully restores the system. For many high performers, simply reducing alcohol frequently, especially during the work week, can dramatically improve both sleep depth and next day energy. Now, once you start stabilizing these upstream systems, metabolic rhythm, fueling patterns, nervous system recovery, and sleep quality, you will see a few things start to happen. Number one, energy stops feeling unpredictable. Number two, focus becomes easy to maintain throughout the day. 3, your recovery improves. Number 4, hormone signaling often stabilizes naturally. And finally, the fatigue that felt constant starts to fade. This is exactly why the framework that I use with clients, the assess method, starts with upstream physiology. Because before we chase hormone numbers, before we obsess over supplements, and before we layer complicated optimization protocols onto the system, we look at the biological foundation. We look at mitochondrial energy production. We look at metabolic stability, nervous system regulation, and circadian rhythm. Because once those systems stabilize, the body becomes incredibly responsive. Your energy will start to improve. Your sleep will get deeper and more restorative. Your focus is going to sharpen again, and that experience of feeling tired all day, even when you're doing everything right, starts disappearing. The truth of it is this. Most high performers aren't lacking in discipline. They never have been. They're simply operating on a metabolic system that has been pushed into survival mode for too long. Once that system receives the signals it needs to stabilize again, the body adapts very quickly. Energy becomes reliable, recovery becomes faster, and that engine that drives high performance begins running smoothly again. If you want to begin rebuilding that foundation, my free 30-day energy reset walks through the exact sequence for restoring metabolic stability, nervous system recovery, and cellular energy production. The link is in the description. Click on it. It's absolutely free. And one quick reminder, you do not tolerate mediocrity in your business. Don't tolerate it in your biology. I'll see you all again very soon. Take care.